Hello, everyone. My name is Frances Hasso. I am a professor in gender, sexuality, and feminist studies, history, and sociology at Duke. Ramadan Mubarak for people who are celebrating Eid. Eid Mubarak, asfet. And this live stream panel is part of the Palestine Seminar, which I designed and I'm teaching in the spring 2024 term at Duke University. This is the fourth of 4 live stream conversation panels integrated into the seminar. Most public seminar events are available as audio recordings on the departmental webpage for the Palestine Seminar, which has become an archive of sorts. We plan for a recording of this panel to also be available on the same page. This week's seminar focus is health in Palestine, for which my students read essays and watched videos and films. I organized this panel because I have a long-standing interest in eugenics and the eugenicist policies that imbue government policies and healthcare and insurance systems. These systems have built into them values and ideologies related to which groups are considered worthy of being born and living a full, healthy, and dynamic life, and which are targeted for extinguishing, or less dramatically, slow, painful life and premature death. Israel's destruction of infrastructure, sanitation services, clean water, electricity, fuel, roads, healthcare institutions, and communications are designed to destroy the systems that bind and sustain communities. In the words of a Palestinian physician in Gaza, Israeli policies titrate Palestinian life, and it has been like that for a long time. What I'll do now is introduce our guests, and then we will have a question and answer conversation. Ayed Yari is director of the Gaza branch of the Palestinian Medical Relief Society. Trained as a urologist, Dr. Yari started working in PMRS in 2003 and holds an MA in public health from Al-Quds University. He has advocated for health as a human right in Palestine and called for an expansion of what we define as health to include psychosocial and political factors, including freedom from occupation. He has written academic papers, given interviews, and appeared before international bodies, including the UN Human Rights Council, to advocate on behalf of his people, including during the 2014 assault on Gaza, the Great March of Return, the acute phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, and most recently since the Israeli assault on Gaza. Aisha Saifi is a Palestinian feminist activist, nurse, community midwife, and health consultant in Palestine. She also holds an MA in social work. She has over 30 years of experience working in Palestine, including cancer awareness campaigns, health and bodily education, combating early marriages, family planning, prenatal, postnatal nutrition, and youth, family, and couples counseling. She is also part of networks that inform and lobby the Palestinian Legislative Council on various laws and policies relevant to women's rights and civic and political participation in Palestinian society. Razzan Quran is a Palestinian and co-founding member of Tala'at Feminist Collective, or Harakat Tala'at, Ramallah chapter, and a member of the Palestine Global Mental Health Network. Razzan is currently a doctoral candidate in clinical psychology at George Washington University, received her counseling training at the Palestine Counseling Center, and held therapy with Palestinian and Syrian refugees in refugee camps across Beirut, Lebanon in fall 2019. Prior to this, Razzan was the regional organizer in the US South with United Students Against Sweatshops while completing studies in Memphis, Tennessee, relying on the decolonial and feminist mentorship of Black feminist and indigenous organizers to connect experiences on life in Palestine with the settler colony on Turtle Island. Rantia Sabah is a Palestinian Fulbright scholar with a master's degree in developmental psychology and early intervention specialization from Case Western Reserve University. She received her BA in psychology from Birzeit University. She gained professional training and experience in applied behavioral analysis through working with children with developmental disabilities. She is professionally trained to provide therapy in a clinical setting and has worked with troubled teenagers in the only juvenile center in Palestine. She also worked as a psychosocial support facilitator for communities most vulnerable to Israeli settler violence. Mary Torfa is a medical student at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, whose family is from the border between Lebanon and Palestine. She completed her MA in Middle Eastern, South Asian, African Studies at Columbia University, where her thesis project focused on trauma memory and the margins of the Nakba. Her writing explores medicine's hand in advancing and addressing socio-political harm. She recently interviewed Dr. Razzan Sitta for Mondoweiss about the role of the physician in liberation struggle and our obligation when confronted with the logic of elimination to remain committed to life. Her work has appeared in The Nation, Mondoweiss, The Baffler, Protean, and elsewhere. She starts her surgical residency in July. I thank all of you for taking precious time to be part of this conversation, and also it's Eid time. And I'm going to jump into the questions. And this is for all of you, and maybe starting with Dr. Yari, and then Aisha, Saifi, Quran, Sabah, and Torfa. Would you each introduce us to the type of work you are doing right now in relation to health in Palestine and how you became involved in such work? It's just a little bit of an introduction. So we'll start with Dr. Yari.
Okay, thanks. I am Aid Yari. I am working as a director of Palestinian Medical Relief Society in Gaza. I am working with my colleagues in Gaza and in West Bank, in east of Jerusalem, to guarantee providing health services to the people, especially who are living in marginalized areas. I am working also to advocate for health as a human right in Palestine. And as Palestinians who are living under the occupation also, I am working and fighting to achieve freedom for our people and to establish our independent state. Palestinian Medical Relief Society is a leading Palestinian rights-based health NGOs that aim to improve the health and the resilience of all Palestinians without discrimination by providing quality primary health care services and mobilizing the community at all levels and advocating for accessible equality health care for all. Usually, when I am doing interviews or during the meetings, one of the questions which usually raised why I am involving in such work, why I am involving in Palestinian Medical Relief Society work. Because I found that the Palestinian Medical Relief Society vision was consistent with my principles I am believing. So I decided to work with Palestinian Medical Relief Society team to achieve this vision. The vision of Palestinian Medical Relief Society for the future of Palestine is that of a democratic and society in which all Palestinians, regardless of gender or background, have unrestricted access to quality health care and enjoy social justice and the full benefit of their human, civic, economic, and social rights. Palestinian Medical Relief Society believes this future can be achieved through the joint effort of a strong civil society organizations, and the transparent implementation of concrete equality, health, and development policies. We, as BMRS, believe that health is the entry point to change.
Thank you. Aisha Saifi.
عايشة أنت على ميوت.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all for this great opportunity to meet all of you. And I'm looking forward to learn many things from you. I'm Aisha Saifi from Jerusalem. I'm a nurse and midwife, and recently I have MA in social work. With over 30 years in my whole experience in the community and at hospitals, I discovered that the women and our girls need more than taking care of their health during their station at hospitals. Most of the time I'm working at hospitals. To know this a little bit information, I'm the founders of the MRC, Medical Relief Committee, when I'm nurse. I'm working in the community, in local community, in Bedouin, in the vulnerable areas in the whole Palestine from north to south. But when I'm taking my second degree as a midwife, and in Palestine, we don't have home birth centers. We have before, at the beginning, when the Palestinian Authority came, we have 3 centers, but unfortunately they closed it. They closed it for many reasons, but in my opinion, the first and the most important reason was the people who lead the Ministry of Health. Most of them, they are gyno-obstetric, and most of them are males. So it's kind of financial issues, because it's like a struggling between midwife and the physicians, who's not for taking care for the woman. Unfortunately, it's financial aspects. So in 2016, it's a hard decision, but I took it. I left the hospitals and I opened my own center, because it's more freely to move for myself and for women. And most of our women, during their labor and in pain, when they are in pain, they don't have the ability or the time to hearing which kinds of social, cultural issues they face. So my place based on Ramallah since 2016. We are welcoming, and sometimes we are reaching, like Medical Relief Committee, we are going to the women. They have many kinds of problems, not healthy problems, social, many things, cultural. It's not NGO, it's part of private, and the door is open for all the nurses and midwives, physician, anyone, or let's say most of us are women and girls, to join the center. So my work for nowadays is to support and looking for the most vulnerable women and girls from Palestinian communities who faced the cultural, religion, many kinds of struggles, and we doing our best to reach them. Thank you.
Thank you. Razzan.
Thank you ومساء الخير وعيد مبارك. وشكرا لاحترام سيدة عايشة مؤسستك. Thank you so much for this space and for the topic that you're hosting, Frances. My name is Razzan Quran, and I maybe will begin reverse, so kind of where I'm at right now and that began. So I'm currently in Boston, Massachusetts at the Boston Medical Center Hospital. I work at the Survivors of Torture Clinic and the Psychosis, Recovery After Psychosis Clinic. And I specifically made these two selections of the sites I want to be at my last year in the US because this whole journey of me coming to the United States for specializing in clinical psychology was always with Palestine at the core of it. I actually didn't know I wanted to be a clinical psychologist until I worked at the Palestine Counseling Center. They have a counseling training, and I was at the time working more as a researcher and anthropologist at the Beirut University Center for Public Health, at the Institute of Community and Public Health. And by working at the Palestine Counseling Center into my second year, one of the locations that Antia was speaking about, the juvenile center, but also kind of seeing what foster systems are like in Palestine, which I hadn't even known because we don't technically have adoption. We call it kafale, mish tabanni, but kind of going to these orphanages and seeing the conditions there. I'd grown up quite sheltered in Palestine. I come from an economically well-off family. We're from Beirut. Both my parents had specialties, and so I was starting to also see the undercurrents of, psychologically, that's what we see as the both the scar and the kind of emanating hope within Palestine. That's the part where Zionism marks, but it's also the part where the Palestinian reclaims it as one's own and creates of it. So I became very curious. And I would say that one of the ways I've been trying to maintain contact with back home is I provide group supervision to Palestinian social workers and therapists as part of the Hebron municipality Naqabe union, psychologist union, and in consultation with at Bethlehem University, at Bethlehem Hospital with Dr. Ivana. And Rentia and I are also in a discussion group of psychologists, both practitioners and scholars, of really both conceptualizing the tremendous amount of loss and suffering in the meantime, so that we can also figure out interventions to work on this, because Palestine, as you all know, is very much rooted in a neoliberal system. So actually, Palestine is one of the first places where this model of outsourcing to INGOs and outsourcing kind of public needs into these different organizations came about. And that takes and really extracts a lot of self-sovereignty and autonomy from the Palestinian people into these bigger agencies that have their indicators and very much can shape how health is defined, how health outcomes are defined, what kind of interventions are used. And I would say, for any Palestinian and pro-Palestinian person, there's always a way for you to be in contact, because many of the conditions currently on Turtle Island are not that different from Palestine. It's only the degree that's different. So if today you find that it's easy to turn away from Palestine, it was when I was in undergrad, I went to Ferguson, and it was the exact same tear gas being thrown there as was when I was a 16-year-old at Nabi Saleh. And so whatever the Zionists are testing now, both in terms of military warfare and weapons, but also psychological operations, psychops, you very much can bet yourself that it's going to be used here. It already is in places like Cop City in Atlanta. But yeah, so I would say that was long-winded, but those are the ways I find these connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Razzan. Rantia, Sabah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Sorry, I'm a bit sick, so I'm trying. So for me, I'm currently doing my PDAT, it's post-degree academic training with Fulbright. And it's an opportunity for Fulbrighters to continue their scholarship and knowledge through practical training. I've continued with a behavioral intervention and got my license in RBT, which is Registered Behavioral Technician. I work with adults with intellectual developmental disabilities on applied behavioral analysis. I think I do agree with Razzan. I think it's very hard for me to have a clear answer of how my work is in relation to Palestine. I feel like it's so hard for me not to have that kind of relation to Palestine consciously and subconsciously. And sometimes it can be very isolating, especially in a country with the policies such as the US. For me, I've trained for 1.5 years in early intervention and with kids with autism, with ADHD, with different kind of disabilities and intellectual developmental issues. And I did the whole time I was taking mind notes on how can I go back to Palestine and start an early intervention services. And just to be honest, I was not that into early intervention before, but seeing the difference of early intervention services and developmental and the resources, the change and the impact, it just made me want to work on having that kind of services to Palestinians, but with the context of the violence and the occupation and all the context that has to do with Palestine and the contextual trauma-informed approaches that has to do with Palestinians. So it might be short, but so far, that's my goal, that's my hope, that I can have an impact, even 1%, that has to do with Palestinian children.
Thank you. Maddie?
Hi, everybody. So I'm wrapping up medical school, and the tough thing about training to be a doctor is it takes forever. And like until you reach a critical mass skill-wise, you're not really useful as a doctor. And so in the interim, I've been trying to figure out like what I can do as somebody who's trained in anthropology, who's trained in history, to try and write with that medical lens in mind, and then also from a place of a particular kind of social capital as a doctor. In terms of why Palestine, part of it is my background, part of it is before starting medical school, I worked at the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, and I interned with some various human rights organizations during med school, and I found the work that these organizations do and many international NGOs do to be pretty disappointing in terms of, one, what you're allowed to say because of what donors allow you to say, and then two, I've found that a lot of these organizations often function as sort of like soft power for the US government. So just brief example, Human Rights Watch, I think in November, whenever Al Ahli Hospital was targeted, Human Rights Watch released a report based on no evidence saying like preliminarily Palestinian rockets, based on nothing. And so they kind of provided cover for Israel in this very discreet way. And so usually when doctors do advocacy work in the US and they want it to be legitimate, it's through these kinds of organizations. And I didn't want that. And so in the interim, before I'm like good enough to be able to practice as a doctor or like have enough skill, and while I have this writing, I've been trying to marry sort of what I know about the social and political forces that shape a person's well-being with the lens that like being a doctor up close provides, even if I'm not on the ground. Yeah.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. Yaghri. How would you describe the humanitarian situation in Gaza after 187 days of Israeli aggression against the land and its people?
Oh, it is too difficult for me and for anyone to describe 187 days in a few minutes. Frankly, I have no words to describe the situation in Gaza. Usually, I am saying that in the dictionary, I don't find any suitable words to describe the situation. Catastrophic, terrible, or it is not enough, and it is not reflect the real situation in Gaza. What is happening is not only war crime. What is happening in Gaza now, it is a real genocide. 187 days of killing and destruction. 187 days. And the people in Gaza are suffering from lack of food, lack of water, shortage of medicine, and the important absence of hope. The people, especially the young generation, they lost the hope. We can say lack of everything in Gaza now. Now, the people, they are dying for many reasons. And I call it is the triangle of this. The first side of this triangle, it is bombing and killing the people. They are dying due to the bombing and killing caused by the Israeli occupation attacks. The second side of the triangle, it is outbreak of diseases and epidemics due to the shortage of medicine and the collapse of the health system. The third side of the triangle, acute malnutrition due to the starvation, especially in the northern area of Gaza Strip, where now there are more than 600 Palestinians they are living. And there is no food in the north area of Gaza, and the people, they are seeking for anything green growing on the agricultural lands to eat. It is the situation now in the northern area. Now we are speaking about more than 1.7 million Palestinians have been forced to leave their houses and to go to crowded shelters in the southern area of Gaza, in Rafah and in Deir al-Balah. And these centers now, they are lacking of the basic services. Now, we registered during our work with other health providers, UNRWA, Ministry of Health, and others. We registered more than 643,000 cases with acute respiratory infections, more than 350,000 cases with diarrhea. Among them, we registered 105,000 children under 5 years. We registered also more than 85,000 cases with scabies and other skin diseases. More than 35 cases also with hepatitis type 1. It is due to the lack of hygiene. In the last months, UNICEF, I think it was being end of February, UNICEF reported that 18% of the children under 5 years in the northern area of Gaza, they are suffering from acute malnutrition due to absence of food, due to starvation. 3% of the children under 5 years, they are suffering from severe acute malnutrition. In the last weeks, it was being registered, tens of children are dead due to acute malnutrition. In Gaza, we have more than, before 7th of October, we have more than 1,100 patients with renal failure, and they needed dialysis 3 times weekly. It is in normal time, but now we lost tens of these cases because they couldn't go to the hospital on time to receive or to do kidney dialysis. Let me inform you about the story of Zinat. Zinat, this child, she followed at the Palestinian Medical Relief Society Center in Gaza City before 7th of October. Zinat, 5 years old, and she has diabetic type 1. We have in our center a special program for the children who had diabetic type 1. She was old. She also need follow-up with the doctor, and she must to do some investigation. But due to the shortage of medicine, due to the we don't found insulin in our center and in the market in Gaza Strip in general. Zinat, 6 or 7 weeks ago, she was dead due to we don't find again the needed insulin for her treatment as the rest of the chronic disease patient. We have in Gaza more than 71,000 patients who are suffering from diabetes. Among them, we have 1,300 children under 16 years. They are suffering from diabetic type 1. Until today, we are speaking about more than 33,000 Palestinians has been killed. 72% of them, they are women and children. And also there are more than 76,000 wounded, and thousands of them became with permanent disabilities. Until today, we have more than 10,000 missing people. They under the rubble for a few months. It is the real situation in Gaza. And of course, the media, they are speaking about what's happening in Gaza. But when we are speaking about the situation, you should to know that we have in Gaza 2.3 million Palestinians. And for each one, he had own story and he had own suffering. Each family in Gaza Strip, they suffered from everything. Personally, end of last February, I lost 38 people or person from my family. They were being killed in the same minute after the Israeli occupation forces. They bombed their house in Deir al-Balah. They evacuated their houses in Gaza City and they evacuated to Deir al-Balah to the friend house. And we have, after that, we only found 18 dead bodies, and the rest of the bodies, it was being fragmented to parts. It is the real situation in Gaza. And of course, when I spoke about genocide, maybe some people told it is what it is. It is not genocide. No, even genocide, it is easy word for us, for our suffering in Gaza now.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for your loss. I think you meant there's 600,000 Palestinians still in the north when you said 600. So I want to follow up and just ask you about the violations against the health system in Gaza, if you can.
Okay, of course, the health system in Gaza, it was being damaged, and usually the Israeli occupation, they are violated each international law. And let me start with 6 years ago, it was being an international report where they reported, it was being 2018 or 17, I guess, they reported that the Palestinian territory is the second most dangerous place on earth for healthcare workers. It was being after Syria. Of course, now the situation is different than now. Palestine, it is the first place in all the countries. The health sector now in Gaza is collapsed or on the verge of collapse, and the health sector unable to cope with the high numbers of casualties and fatalities. We are speaking about thousands of injured people. They are coming in the same hour in the hospitals, and of course it is too difficult for any health system to face and to deal with this high number. The Israeli aggression caused serious damage to the health infrastructure. We are speaking about more or around 400 health personnel were killed, and the health facilities, including 26 hospitals, were damaged, and more than 101 ambulances were partially or completely damaged. We are speaking now only 6 hospitals among 36 in Gaza Strip is still functioning partially, and the remaining of the hospital out of the service due to direct or indirect Israeli attack or due to the shortage of fuel. The same it is for the primary healthcare centers. The majority of the primary healthcare centers in Gaza Strip also it is not functioning. I can give you one example. Palestinian Medical Relief Society, we run 11 health centers in Gaza Strip. Now we manage to open or to work through only one primary healthcare center in Gaza City. For the other center, part of them they were being demolished, part of them they are severe damaged, and others we haven't any information about the other centers. Why is that? We integrate. We did some modification for our work, and we run and we provide the health services through outreach teams to visit the people in the shelters. And even that, we should to mention that the Israeli occupation arrested more than 200 personnel, health personnel, and they are now subjected to torture, and dozens of the health workers are also still missing. We haven't any information about them. Hospitals, usually they have lost their treatment ability and capacity, and medical teams are treating the wounded with very limited capabilities. Can you imagine that we are now in the 21st century? Now in Gaza hospitals, we did amputation and cesarean section for women without anesthesia and without any painkiller, because there is no any painkiller to use inside the hospital. It is the real situation. And of course, as I mentioned before, Israeli occupation, they violated all the international law. They don't respect any of the international human laws. Thanks.
Thank you. For Aisha Saifi, as an experienced nurse midwife in Palestine, what do you consider to be the main challenges facing girls and women in reproductive and maternal health? And I know you and I work on this issue. I don't know if you have any knowledge for Gaza as well. Obviously, it's a catastrophe now, but maybe if you can speak generally of just the main challenges in a couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Aid. As an experienced nurse and midwife, I can provide insight into the challenges facing women and girls in Palestine in reproductive health and maternal health, including maybe Dr. Aid has more information about Gaza, but I have some contacts with the midwives. They are working there, and one of them, she's not a midwife, she's an employee in an NGO in Ramallah called Dalia, and she's called me just before her due few days, and I'm talking to her that I'm suspected that she's going to normal delivery. After I, long conversation, what to do, how to do, which kinds of symptoms, if she has during attack or during the night. And I shocked that a few minutes before we finished the conversation, she's going to a C-section. And really, it's really hurt my heart. So the first question I asked her, which kinds of anesthesia you have? And she told me she bought a bottle of, the medications to cover the operation. And immediately, not because I am a woman, because I am a mother, I can talk about which kinds of, it's not obstacles, it's kind of war against our women and our girls. All the international organizations, the human rights, all of the women organizations talking about women. but no one talking about which kinds of conditions our women in Gaza or in the West Bank and Jerusalem we are going through, which kinds of pain we are, which kind of unknown, our maternal health, our babies, our pregnancy. So I have many points to highlight it in the Palestinian community, Gaza, West Bank. And you have to know, in West Bank, even we don't have the catastrophe or the genocides like Gaza, but we have double checkpoints at before the war. We have around 680 checkpoints around the West Bank and Gaza and Jerusalem, and you know the ugly wall around Jerusalem. So it's doubled nowadays. So limited access to the healthcare services, it's affected our women. So imagine from village to village, they put like a gate and they close it, depend on the soldier's mood. So if you are in risky pregnancy, what to do? There is no access to the cities. There is no health home birth midwives, and even the midwives. I'm going through Ramallah and Jerusalem and Nablus. Many of our midwives, they're coming far away from north and south to work at Ramallah hospitals. And when it's closed, or the checkpoint or the siege or anything from the unpredictable, the Israeli soldiers, the midwives, the employees doesn't be on their duty on time. So the midwife on the same shift has to do double shift. Double shift, it means 18 hours. 16 hours on the ongoing work to cover the shortages of the midwife. So limited access to health care services for both women and the health team. Second one, the infrastructure and resources constraints. Also, it's not because of the war, also because of the occupation. For example, the medical supplies, for example, the skilled healthcare professional, comprehensive taking care for the cases, and many things. And the other things, it's high maternal and morbidity and mortality rate among our women and our children, newborn children. And I think we don't have statistics in 2023 said that this number of women are died during their delivery or the newborn babies. So the estimated numbers, it's high in Gaza more than in the West Bank, but also on the West Bank, because I am a midwife, and sometimes it's not sometimes, usually every year I'm a clinical instructor with Beit Lahem University for students who has a maternity course. So when the woman has complicated and they transfer the woman from one hospital to another, they put the morbidity rate under another things, not due to the reproductive health. So this is another thing. And this thing, I think one of you, Razzan, you are psychiatric. No one taking care of the psychological stress and the trauma among our women and our girls in both in Gaza, in Jerusalem, and in West Bank. Most of our women, the last statistic or the last study, it's called more than 70% of our women going through depression, not the post-psychosis or post-blues. It's women single or with babies, we are under depression. And unfortunately, I'm looking for how many hospitals or clinics taking care of the psychological things among our women. There is just one hospital in Bethlehem University, and I don't know, maybe Dr. Aid correct me, there is just one hospital in Gaza. So every woman has to go through these kinds of psychological things. She has to pay it on her own self to take the services, and it costs a lot, and sometimes it costs many times to visit the clinic, and other things. It's the cultural and social norms we faced in our community. Sometimes it's the rights of reproductive health, the rights of employees who's giving the care. So it's sometimes it's one thing mixed with the other things, and at the end, the one who lost the health or the life is the woman and the newborn babies. And sometimes we have Bedouins, and we have like Masafir Yatta, if you heard about Hebron, and we have many places. They don't have governmental clinics or the government or NGOs clinics. So this displacement and vulnerable populations, they face more the others. And I think not the barriers between the populations and the checkpoints and the cultural issues and the access to the health centers. The most important things, it's, I don't know if you understand the health system in Palestine. We have three parts: one governmental, and the other one it's belongs to the UNRWA, UN, and the other one is private. And nowadays in Ramallah city, if you look for the hospitals, just one big governmental hospitals and the other it's a private. And if you seek the help from these hospitals, they don't have the ability to care for women and newborns if there is any kinds of complications happens. So what to do? They refer the woman to the governmental hospitals, and if the governmental hospital doesn't has the health team or the equipment, they refer them to Jerusalem. And imagine if you have take the ambulance from Ramallah to Jerusalem or from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, you have to change the ambulance. And if the woman has severe bleeding, we call it DIC. It's like the blood became like water. She will lost her life in a few minutes. So at the checkpoints, they have to change the ambulance and to check the ambulance and the woman. So I don't have exactly numbers of our women, they lost their lives, and also the newborn, they lost their life. So we are struggling in just, it's not just during war. We are under the siege, under the war, all of our whole life. So as a midwife and as a social worker, we need more than we have. But unfortunately, the international organizations or national organizations, they looking just for specific things among the women and children health. And the big things, they forget it. When we have the catastrophe, they remember that we have many shortages in our hospitals. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Yeri, were you going to add something about about Gaza?
Yeah. Let me add.
Go ahead.
Okay, let me add 2 or 3 points. It is according to our work inside the shelters now in the last 6 months. As I informed you before, that Palestinian Medical Relief Society now operating around 38 outreach teams to work inside the shelters to serve the people there. And according to our follow-up and statistics, we have 30% of the women, they are facing serious complications during and after the delivery. We are speaking about now, we have 66,000 women, they are breastfeeding now in this time. And of course, you can imagine how this woman can deal with their babies. They are suffering, this woman, from malnutrition. They are suffering from poor immunity, and it is too difficult for them to breast the babies. And sometimes, or usually also, because there is no powder milk for the babies, it is too difficult to prepare for the baby even the milk. And there is some cases due to the circumstances in the shelters and due to psychological situation for the woman or for the pregnant, we are also facing some early delivery for some cases. You should to take in consideration each 8 to 9 minutes we have one newborn in Gaza Strip. We have around 180 children, and you can imagine how the people or how the family can work and how they can receive their new baby in this situation. It is too difficult to explain for the people who are living in the tents without any water, with lack of hygiene, how they will receive their baby there.
Thank you. This question is for Rantia and Razzan. Can you each discuss with respect to trauma, healing, and coping, what you see as some of the limits in training and sensibility in Western psychological approaches? To what degree are these problems universal, and to what degree do they fail, when applied to subordinated communities, including in Palestine? So we can start with Rantia and then Razzan.
Thank you. I'm gonna give from my own personal experience and opinion. I think Razzan has more hands-on experience when it comes to the practical clinical settings. But for me, I feel the Western psychological approaches often prioritize individualistic perspectives and tend to focus on the symptom reduction rather than addressing the underlying social, cultural, and political factors that contributes to that person's trauma or struggle or illness. It usually tends to overlook the collective and intergeneration aspects of the trauma in these community and focuses only on the current symptoms rather than what's behind the symptoms. And there's in how I see it and how I view it from my program and the training is that there's a bit of a cultural insensitivity and empathy when it comes to Western models of therapy. There's a lot of detachment from the therapist and concern to the client when it's very different from my experience when it comes to Palestine in the clinical settings with Palestinians, and it's very hard to detach Palestine and the context from your session. The Western models of therapy, honestly, I don't think it does really address the power dynamics, and that's a huge issue. And it does not address the systemic oppression. And we can see that with Black African communities here in the US, where they actually have a hard time finding the right therapy, the right therapist for them. This is like from a very shallow kind of insight that I had. It's very hard. There's a lot of stigma already, the same as Palestinians, but it's very hard for you to find a therapist that can really hear you, and it's beyond what you what you're giving. And I think where healing is often framed here as an individual process, and it neglects the importance of the community support and the cultural practices in coping and resilience. So there's a tendency to pathologize the natural responses to trauma, and like anger and grief, and particularly in the marginalized communities here in the US again, but also in Palestine in different aspects, and which can lead to overdiagnose of mental disorders and mental health issues. And there's a lot of inappropriate interventions that then is based on this diagnosis that could not be the full truth, and which can really do more harm than good. So I think the therapeutic techniques developed in the Western context, I do not agree that we need to put them all aside. I think there's legit techniques and legit theories and therapy that is very, very important. But one thing is that it's the connection between the society and the community and beyond the individual that we need to focus on and highlight, right? So it's more about, it's not Western versus Eastern. It's more, how can we combine both the Western therapy techniques and approaches into the Eastern, and vice versa as well, right? Because there's a lot of good things that we can give as Middle Easterns with our hospitality, right? It comes from integrated in our personality and how we view the world. There's a lot of empathy, there's a lot of connection to the other person. And I feel like with both approaches, there could be more real meaning when it comes to therapy. And one last thing from my view when it comes to the Westernized approaches is that there's a lot of, when it comes to diagnosis and therapy, there's a lot of, like, as we said, individualist approach, but which also plays a role in increasing the sense of self-centerism. And with the self-centerism, when it comes to pure individual therapy, there's a lot of times that you start detaching your symptoms and your struggle from the society, right? And a lot of times what happens, again, of how I saw it, it's the blaming of others rather than taking the agency and the responsibility and accountability in a very healthy way due to certain behaviors. And we see the other side where in Palestine, there's a lot of harsh and I don't know how to say it, there's a lot of self-hatred that it's portrayed from the context as well, because we see how it's systemically, the occupation has been telling us you're worthless. So, and we see that with the therapy, that there's a lot of times that you're trying to like validate the other person's emotion and be like, hey, chill, like there's a lot of criticism, self-criticism that comes also from self-hatred. So I don't feel like there's like one answer, and I feel like there's a lot of work that we need to incorporate in our job and in our clinical settings, where we don't really dismiss everything, and rather than just give ourselves the space, because we have the right to have some space in trying and error, right? And that's one also, again, it's a part of feeling so anxious and so like behind everything that you just need to have a result. So I feel like it's very important for us to combine both in our practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Rantia. Razzan?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rantia. And I actually want to say to the folks, I can't see your images, but I saw your name in the attendee list. Like I think that the question itself begins to answer in the way that you're showing up and being present right now. I felt an immense weight in my body for Dr. Ayed to be present, showing up, and in the same breath articulating immense loss. That genocide, which is being contested, is too small of a word to describe and capture this reality. For Aisha Saifi to be talking to us about a woman she was on the phone with, for hours working through the steps to then here she's being rushed into a C-section. You know, these are, like Dr. Aid was saying, like Aisha, Rantia, Mari, when we say these are people with real stories, I really believe that's where this begins. This is where it begins. And so the tendency to want to dissociate, to numb, to maybe get distracted by reaching for your phone. I just invite you to notice these little, I'm in a meeting. Oop, I'm at a hospital, so I have to just check 1 second.
Actually, if it's more than 1 second.
Frances, if you want, I can go.
Yeah.
And then go back.
So the question for you, and then we'll pick up with Razzan, is if you could. Are you back? Okay,
yes.
good. Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
For Maddie, I have a very similar question, but go.
I'm so sorry about that. I tried to block out time, but I'm also أنا مش رئيسة نفسي في المستشفى بيجبرني. But yeah, I just wanted to bring your attention to that. And just to wrap it up, because I know we have a little bit of time, I agree with everything and I'm grateful to you, Rantia, for the way you framed it. And I would just kind of say that there's this wonderful book by Nadia Abul Haj called Combat Trauma. And she traces the lineage of PTSD. And I think this is very important because in order to gain some kind of legitimacy for the pain and the struggle, we almost force Palestinians to have to fit into these certain kinds of diagnoses in which the criteria doesn't even emanate from the reality on the lived ground, right? That's a lot of what Rantia was just speaking to. And no, you know, you're looking at the symptom reduction, but really decontextualizing the precondition that's bringing all of that up. We also have people like Ranan Nashashibi, who runs the Palestinian Counseling Center. She talks a lot about this, and it's really important. Nadira Shalhoub-Kevorkian, who talks about unchilding in this process as well. I mean, this is all linking to the fact of saying there is a material reality and preconditions which are also impinging on the psyche and on the psychological development. I also just want to mention here that what is trauma, right? Like in Dr. Samah Jabir, she tells us that, you know, don't forget that trauma at its basic core is being stuck in time. Whenever the basic things we try to do in working with trauma is to try to create a narrative and a storyline of what happens, because the trauma is so shocking to the body, we fragment things. And so it's in an image, it's in a flashback, it's in a sensation, but there's no kind of flow and metabolizing of that. And it's also evoking helplessness. And so that's why we find with like Zionist military industrial complex and their settler colonialism and all forms of oppression really work on traumatizing the oppressed population, because if a population feels helpless, it can more easily be controlled, manipulated, made docile, and acquiesces. And you know, the PTSD specifically, very brilliantly, Nadia Abul Haj puts in her book, the US government, there was always, they called it combat trauma from World War I. There's always these writings. But when does the US government really codify this into the DSM? It codifies it during Vietnam War. Why does it codify it? Because the return of so many US Americans that are having severe reactions, really what I would call moral injury, having to confront themselves as committing atrocities and coming back and then all of a sudden being welcomed as brother, father, sibling, you know, lover, and knowing what they had done in massacres and genocides in Vietnam. The American government needed to create a diagnosis so that it can push away the blame from it putting its people into this situation. So you locate the pathology in the individual, you concretize it as a disorder, and then what does the government have to do? I mean, I lived in Washington, D.C. The number one histories I heard from homeless people that were willing to speak with me is, I'm a vet, I'm a US vet, right? So I want you to keep this in mind. The last thing I'll say about Palestine and how it's different is that there was a study that was done where children in Gaza were given a PTSD manualized treatment, and yalla, let's help you work through your trauma. Part of it was a drawing expressive therapy intervention, and it worsened their symptoms. asking these children to be dealt with in a model that does not meet their reality, that had no kind of intervention of the storylines that we as Palestinians, many of which are Muslim, and when they're not Muslim, they're Christian, but it's also infused with the rawhaniyat and spiritual scripture and storytelling. Family is so imbued. And so when you come and bring a model like Rantia was saying that's so individualizing, it actually is taking away any kind of implicit base someone has to lean on when they're destabilized. And so what I would say is, like, in the US, they want you to cope so that you become easily manageable and docile. In Palestine, we need you to cope so you can continue to resist towards our liberation. In America, healing really means that you become a consumer, buy more, take more, be numbed, be desensitized. Self-care shifting into this thing that's very commodified. Whereas for Palestinian, what we're working towards is healing means being self-generative. Healing means really, the primary thing that's always under dispute is our relationship to land. So whether you grew up in Mukhayyam al-Jalazon, Masafir Yatta, had to move to Ramallah into like a more into more urban lifestyle, reconnecting people with agroecology, with people like Saad Daghir do, is really important. These aren't the things that are spoken, they're not in our training manuals, but it's very important. Thanks for your patience. I know that was long.
No, thank you so much. So for Mary Turfa, I wonder if you can comment on the state of medical education in the West, since you're almost done with your degree, and what the gaps are.
Yeah, we're in the Department of Gender, Sexuality, and Feminist Studies, right? So like most of you are familiar with the idea that there's no such thing as objectivity, especially when you're dealing with full human beings. It's tricky with something like medicine, because on one hand you have data, you have an organ that looks a certain way, or you have a blood pressure reading, so that's objective data. But then it's materializing in a person who's in front of you or asleep on a table. But regardless, like, you have to deal with a human being, and there's this weird tension that's constantly at play, where in one sense you're a scientist, in another sense you're like a care provider. And so a medicine solution for that has been, and we mentioned this before, but some kind of like detachment. You don't involve yourself really with the human being in front of you. You focus on the data, you focus on the technical skill set you have. And in this way too, it justifies being sort of depoliticized, in a way that's kind of interesting. So the idea is that in order to be able to treat everybody, you cannot invest yourself in politics, because somehow that's like a denigration of your role as a doctor. And it's fascinating that this is only ever applied selectively. So in my experience over the course of my 4 years of training, I noticed that when Russia invaded Ukraine, we were allowed to discuss it. People had sunflowers, whatever, in their background on Zoom. That was okay, because I'm at a liberal medical school. When Donald Trump was elected, that was okay to discuss. When Roe was overturned, we had OB/GYNs give us lectures about like contingency planning for in case abortions were outlawed at my specific hospital. And even like as part of my training, one of the institutions I worked at was the Veterans Association at the VA, where there are like American flags everywhere, and somehow that kind of politics is okay. And what I have realized over the course of however long it's been is that what they mean by not being political is that you are allowed to say things as long as it floats the US line. And so I would not be surprised if, for example, as calls for a ceasefire, which have not been issued yet for Gaza by any of the major American journals, medical journals, if the US government starts to say ceasefire, we might start seeing calls for a ceasefire. And so what's missing from medical education is kind of what's missing from the entire infrastructure, which is like an understanding of medicine as anything beyond an arm of control of bodies, of people, and like abroad, an arm of the United States as like an empire. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. In terms of like my medical institution specifically, the kinds of outreach that have happened for Palestinians and around Palestine have been on an individual basis. So an attending physician will send me an email and ask if I'm okay in private. But the general climate is either apathy or fear or a mixture of both. And there is a real sense that you could lose your career, even when I write things, I know that I'm taking a risk. And it's very, very sad that saying something as basic as hospitals should not be bombed is not only not allowed, but there are journals, the Journal of the American Medical Association, their first viewpoint, which is their version of an opinion article, the first thing they wrote was saying that hospitals could be bombed under some circumstances, the first thing they let published. So the extent to which the things that we say that we're supposed to be doing, the ostensible values that we uphold, and then what happens when empire calls. I don't know, there's a lot of work to be done in American medicine, but the way that I've reasoned it for myself is that medicine is a tool. It's not like a moral currency. This idea that doctors are somehow more moral because of a very technical training that they get is just not, it's not true.
Thank you. So actually that relates to whether any of you would like to reflect on what appears to be the almost total silence of especially Western medical institutions and associations on the genocide in Gaza, or are there some associations or that have issued statements in support of Palestinians that we should be aware of? Like, I think I ran into an early international midwifery for justice. I can't remember what it was called, but maybe we can start with Maddie since you're speaking, and then we'll go to Dr. Yari. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of American medicine, most of the organizing that I've seen has happened at the grassroots level. So there's an organization, for example, called, I think, Doctors Against Genocide. There's Healthcare Workers for Palestine. There are a few of these groups that have started organically by physicians who are being silenced by their institutions or have submitted things to the American Medical Association, the Journal of the American Medical Association, or the New England Journal of Medicine, or these different medical journals, and have been denied publication. And so there is organizing, but not at the level of kind of like pre-existing systems. And I don't expect that to change now, or yeah, these are like arms of power, I think.
Yeah. Dr. Yari?
Of course, yeah, I think it is not silence all for the medical institutions in the Western country. It is a shame of the international community who is, until now, they are silent, they are watching, and they don't act to stop this genocide against Palestinians. I want to inform you that there is a conference in Argentina now. It is going now in these days for people health movement, and during this conference they stated a statement about the struggle of Palestinians and the solidarity with Palestinians, and even they said it is no struggle for people health movement to achieve right to health without Gaza intervention. That means they are solidarity of Gaza. It was being until now. This conference is going in Argentina, and a few hours ago I also participated with them in this conference. Let me add something also. I heard that it was being some demonstration in UK, I think in February, yeah, for the medical or the healthcare providers. They demonstrate against what is happening in Gaza and to solidarity with Palestinian healthcare. But until now, the demonstrations and the solidarity activity, it is not enough. It is not enough until now. And I think we should differentiate between the public events and public opinion in Western country and the opinion of or the decision maker in these countries. The majority of the people now in Western country, in all the world, they are with Palestinian, and the narrative, it was being changed to support Palestinian narrative. But the problem, it is still that how to pressure the leaders of this community to change these opinions, to take decision in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Aisha, do you know anything about Western nursing, midwifery organizations? Have they said anything or taken a stand?
Unfortunately, no. We, as a Palestinian Association for Nursing and Midwives, we didn't hear anything from them. And I'm in daily base, I'm looking for their magazines and for their maqali, and there is nothing. But I have a good contact with an American organization, NGO called MADRE, M-A-D-R-E, and she's pro-Palestinians. And I has like an article with the executive director for these organizations, and many of the Israelis midwives attacked this organization and attacked these articles. Why you say that and say what you are doing? Because mainly she's a Jew, not Israelis, but they attacked her. But before the war in Gaza, I read a lot of things about Ukraine, and most of the international midwives and nurses, they joining the articles and they joining to volunteer there. But when it reached the Palestine and our women, no one say anything, unfortunately.
Thank you. And then Razzan and Rantia, what do you know about like Western psychiatric, psychological, clinical? Yeah, what do you know?
Quite clearly, I just know that exactly like Mary said, it's all really corrupt. And that, you know, as psychologists, as individuals, people are standing up, people are doing things, but the associations and the institutions which purport to represent the people, it's just a hoarding of Zionist, oppressive, white supremacist, cis heteropatriarchal power. And I would say that that was a mouthful, Frances. But like, and I would say that Yani, there was a really badass, excuse my language, like really great radical letter, like, you know, written by a section on social responsibility within Division 39 of APA, Psychological Association. And, you know, the APA freaked out. This is on the backs of 2020 when they released and oh, we apologize for everything we've done to Black people and African Americans of this country. And the APA takes its responsibility, but it's always so good at doing these kind of, you know, later apologies for unbelievable prejudice and discrimination. But in the now, there isn't that. So my suggestion to people is, you know, don't try to go into these institutions and fix them from the in. Create your own institutions and associations on the outside. Thank you.
Rantia, do you have anything else on that?
I don't really, just like one comment. For me, being Palestinian in Cleveland, Ohio has been horrible. And it's just, I wouldn't really expect a lot, especially educational institutions as the one that I was in, to really stand up and talk. There was a lot of hatred. There was a lot of threats. So it's the actual, like literally the opposite of like even having a statement. That's not even like realistic at this point. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to cut some of my questions, but I do think I want to go a few minutes past 3:30. This question is for Dr. Yeri, is if you can tell us a little bit of what's happening with UNRWA in terms of delivering healthcare in Gaza, and what are its main challenges right now, given the freezing and reducing of financial support by Western countries, including the United States. So, and then related to that, I wonder, like, what are the priorities right now for Gaza, you know, medical organizations? So UNRWA, the challenges, and then what are the priorities right now for medical care, healthcare in Gaza?
Okay, it is 3 questions, not 1 question. Okay. Anyway, first
yeah,
of
but
all,
you have to be efficient.
okay. Okay. Let me first of all to clarify that funding of UNRWA, it is an international responsibility toward Palestinian refugee. UNRWA and its services are a right of Palestinians, refugee until they return to their homes from which they were displaced in 1948 as a result of Nakba. And it is a decision of UN General Assembly. It is not our speech. Okay? UNRWA in general, UNRWA providing different services such education, health, social services, distributing food for the Palestinian refugee, and they are operating in 5 areas. They are operating in Gaza Strip, West Bank, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, and they are working in refugee camps. UNRWA, we should to take in consideration the main health provider in primary health care in Gaza. And UNRWA also providing the health care through 22 healthcare centers in Gaza Strip. And also UNRWA, the second largest employer in Gaza after Palestinian Authority. We should to take all these figures before we are speaking about cutting of fund of UNRWA or rephrasing the fund, because it was been a challenges for UNRWA and challenges also for the Palestinian community, because we are speaking about if it will be cut the fund of UNRWA, that's mean 2 million refugees in Gaza Strip will be denied access to emergency aid and to food also. And it means that 22 healthcare centers will be also closed. And it's mean also 287 schools, elementary schools will be closed. And 13,000 Palestinians, they will lose their jobs and will be this family without any income. Of course, it is until now it's written for UNRWA, but in the last 2-3 weeks, we witnessed that some changes in the Western country decision toward refund UNRWA again. We know that it is a plans, it is a certain political plans from Netanyahu, from Israel, and they are supported by USA. They want to replace UNRWA with another UN agencies to provide services for the refugee, and they want to eliminate the Palestinian refugee cause in general. It is about UNRWA in general. If we are speaking about the challenges, of course, the challenges, they are different, but and many challenges, but the main 2 challenges. The first one, it is exists of Israeli occupation, and there is killing this and destroyed everything, and they violated all the international law that exist of the Israeli occupation. It is the main challenges for Palestinians in general, not only for challenges to provide health services in Palestine. Second challenge is it is shortage of fund, external fund. All the people know that Palestinian Authority depend on the external fund. And in the last few months, Israelis, they cut a lot of the money of Palestinian Authority, and Palestinian Authority not able to even to pay their salary for their employees. Why that? The external fund and the support of Palestinian, it is still one of the challenges during our work. Third question, I think it was been about our priority, yeah?
Yeah.
Of course,
Yes.
in general, the biggest and the first priority, it is how we can stop this genocide, how we can reach quiet, how the international community can help us to live in peace, such other people in the world. It is the first and the top priority now in Gaza. Second one, how to guarantee providing and entering all goods to Gaza. I mean, food, water, medicine, and everything. How to guarantee opening humanitarian corridor to enter all the needs of Gaza. Also, it is a priority for us. Third issue, how we can guarantee treat our injured people and how we can guarantee treat our patients. And it is huge need to first to transfer this patient and this injured outside Gaza to have a treatment in Arabic country or in other countries. It is one of the most important and the priority for us. And of course, if we are speaking about the current situation, we should to guarantee sustainability of the services provided now for the people in Gaza Strip, especially for the people in the shelters. I mean the services, different services, health services, and how we can guarantee also housing them, because it is too important now, even if we will witness in the coming few days ceasefire or a truce, the people, they will seek where to live. And the majority of Gaza houses, we are speaking about 60% of Gaza houses were demolished. It is important now for the international community to think how they can support the Palestinians to live in Gaza Strip in caravans, or how they can help Palestinians to rebuild their houses. Second point, it is how rebuild health sector. It is the important point for us as the health activists. I think it is the main priorities for the Palestinians now.
Thank you. So I'm going to skip some questions. I'm going to make one comment, to turn a question into a comment, and then just ask you a final question. So one of the things I was going to ask about that I still think is important is the resilience, recovery, and perseverance are common words when talking about Gaza and Palestinians in Gaza. But I think this is a massively unfair burden to put on any individual or people, because I think that, yes, you want strength and you want resilience as a collectivity, but there's immense individually and collectively experienced loss, pain, and trauma that will never be put right. And honestly, I think about this all the time. So what I want to do is just kind of wrap up with this, which is here in our area, we have a Triangle Health Workers for Palestine group that has emerged in the last few months. In contrast, health administrations have refused to take meaningful public positions or steps against the ongoing genocide and targeting of Palestinian healthcare workers, hospitals and clinics and patients. What should healthcare workers outside of Palestine especially be doing or demanding of the associations they are affiliated with and the institutions in which they work? Related, does it make sense to ask foreigners and diaspora Palestinians with medical training and resources to organize brigades to enter Gaza? What would Palestinian healthcare workers find most useful? What are the priorities? You know, like obviously we want the genocide to end, and we're fighting for that, and we want an end to the siege, and we want a liberated Palestine. So this question is about what should medical workers be asking for and doing. And I'm just going to start with Dr. Yari because you're there, and then we'll go through with everybody else and we'll wrap up. Tfaddal.
Okay, to save the time, because I know that you have limited time. I think there is a lot that can done by the people who are supporting for, and I mean Palestinians and other people who are solidarity with us. I think the first they can participate in the demonstration demanding an end of the killing and genocide of Gaza. I think you should to act today and not tomorrow to stop this genocide. Second, you can participate in the campaign to boycott of Israel. All health workers, they can boycott the joint activities with Israeli university or Israeli hospitals. The third point, I think, maybe you can organize some medical missions to visit Gaza to treat the injured people there, and also to donate or to enter medicine and other medical equipment for Gaza health sector. The fourth step, I think, you can include the Palestinian health worker in the training programs in your institutions, if you would like, and if you can do it. And the last point I mentioned before, it is how to contribute to rebuild health sector again in Gaza. I think it is the main point now, it is in my mind.
Yes, thank you. Aisha Saifi.
Yeah, I have similar what Dr. Aid said, but in different words. First one, advocacy and awareness among the world and the professional healthcare providers. Second, medical aid supplies, how to send it and how to put pressure on especially on the Egypt side, to let them enter. Training and capacity building for the people who lives in Gaza and also in the West Bank. Something called telemedicine and the remote support for the Palestinians. Solidarity and medical missions for the Palestinians. Policy advocacy. Access to medical supplies and equipment. Mental health support. It's really very important and crucial things on these days. And emergency preparedness and response. And of course, later on, when the war it's stopped, the capacity building for the health team in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Razzan. Razzan Quran.
Yes, I'm going to answer this and then I have to jump off if that's okay.
Yes.
I really love what Dr. Ayed and Aisha suggested. I'm going to say a little bit from the US side. My suggestion is to really look up your code of ethics and regulations, and then to turn that around on these institutions. There is an incitement of doing harm, and I think that like there are ways that this should be really, really confronted. To reach out to people like Palestine Legal, Center for Constitutional Rights, because I'm not a legal expert, and see what about it. The other thing I would say is increasingly now with this kind of DEI initiatives and whatnot that are coming up in hospital settings and in healthcare facilities, there's a lot of asks for you to fill out surveys. Take those surveys, write your real comments, utilize the fact that it's anonymous, let them parse through that data. And I would say direct action. I mean, you know, there's been multiple policies. I'm not even technically allowed to be doing this right now. And, you know, and these are the little ways that you kind of, you know, push against. And, you know, we've had protests also by healthcare workers for Palestine. And these are important things to engage in. And so I would say, like, don't give up, connect, organize, and turn the rule book on them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Razzan. And thank you for participating. Rantia, and then Mary, and then we'll wrap.
I think I do agree with everything the husband said. I think advocacy, raising awareness, campaigning goes a long way. And being a Palestinian, only here for less than 2 years, going back to Palestine at the end of the year, I've seen the difference. And I've seen how important it is to, like, the small steps that it's making a huge change just by advocacy, just by campaigning, just literally by posting Instagram posts that literally can change. So never stop speaking. Resistance is an ongoing process, and it's a long process, but we have to keep going. One last thing is, I think one of the most important things from my experience as a Palestinian here going to protest for Palestinians in Cleveland, I felt isolated. I didn't really feel that I'm heard. And I think it was, for me, my reaction is to protect myself by isolating and just looking for Palestinians who are in Palestine or Fulbrighters. So I think really we need to focus any kind of work that's going to happen, whoever is interested in helping and working with Palestinians and for Palestinians, always collaborate, always consult other Palestinians in the same field, because this is it. We don't want to have a white savior kind of complexity when it comes to this. You need to collaborate. You need to hear voices of Palestinians in the land and on the ground. So this is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rantia. Mary Torfa, you'll have the last word.
Yeah, I think like a place to start for me is to be careful not to be making Palestine about ourselves. So like the US has this incredible way of taking, for example, anti-racism has become basically a self-help genre in the US. And so there's a way in which other people suffering, because like if we take the right side, then it's about our moral goodness. And that goes into the language of like perseverance and sumud. It becomes a way of assuaging our own guilt. So we talk about how resilient these people are so that whether we feel bad or not, we are doing this to them. And in a lot of like medical spaces, for example, what has been done is internal groups where people of like minds get together and talk to feel good. And that can be even going to protests, that can be a starting point, but it doesn't on its own do anything for the people over there. It's catharsis for you. And it's important to keep that in mind in terms of like what doctors here can do over there or medical workers here. In some ways, the infrastructure there is saturated because there are only so many operating rooms that are still functional. And so again, it feels good to go and like stand there and watch the operating rooms run, but I don't know how much that does for other people. I think like we do have to be thinking about what comes after a ceasefire, what rebuilding would take. But in this moment, it can't be about like what feels most validating for us or most meaningful, even if that's sustaining. It has to be about like what will get a ceasefire most quickly. And like, if we pull on different strings, if we vote, whatever, but just, I don't know. And whatever we're doing isn't enough yet. So I don't have a good answer, but something different from what's happening right now.
Thank you all very, very much. We really appreciate you. And we will be posting audio and probably video of this panel, and I'll let you know when that happens. Okay? And
thank you all. Nice to meet you all. Bye-bye.
yes, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.